Yeah, I was done making my points anyway.
How are you doing, Mark?
I'm heartily disappointed at some people that I thought were gonna do something, and now I'm wasting my time. But I've been doing training, so I've been taking 4 hours out of my day every day to do this training, and
Oh, wow.
it's it's more of a mess than I could have imagined. So I'm like, I don't understand, Paul. You would think I offered them. I said, look, I'll just go do a curriculum for you. Not a problem. I've done that before. Corporate training is not a big deal, right? No, 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 no. Let them do it. And I'm like, okay. And then the company that we're subcontracting for did it, and they never checked any of the work. And then instead of that company doing the training, the company I'm working with did the training, and it's all wrong. Like the
Oh,
slides are wrong, the examples don't, and I'm like, you didn't run through this? They've been not doing the right thing all along, right? They're a month behind, right? So I figured like you check their work before you tried to do what they said to do, and they didn't check their work, and I'm like, oh,
oh, wow.
uh,
That's people.
I know.
That's people.
That's the problem. If
That's
we
the
could just get the
problem.
people to stop peopling, then everything would be great, right?
Yeah, but then we also don't have people, and people are also great. So
Oh,
it's the human condition.
I had a solution and you ruined it, Paul. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Yeah. I've been busy, but putting out some videos and that kind of thing. So, no, it's
You
been
got any good ones coming up? Have you watched any great YouTube channels like Navigating Patterns, maybe?
is that a YouTube channel? Who's on that channel?
It's the best YouTube channel of all time, Paul. Of all time. That guy just came out with a new long form video on money and crypto because Father Eric mentioned it. So
Oh,
I had request on BOM. I'm like, I got to take care of my BOM peeps. So
okay.
I did a longer video for Father Eric. I mean, he's Catholic, so it's one of those struggles for me, but I did it anyway.
So do you have a brief summary of what you said in your about crypto?
Yeah, I'm up in the air on crypto, right? It's trying to split the materialism baby to some extent, and
Okay.
I'm not a materialist, right?
Okay.
Material important, but material not primary. That's what I
Okay.
mean by not a materialist.
Okay.
Just in case people are, oh, you don't think material exists. No, I think material exists. I just don't think it's the most important thing, right? And so crypto is being driven by forces that it doesn't understand. And the reason why the dollar went up and crypto went down is because people don't understand that money is driven by fear in the future, right? Or fear
Yeah.
of the future.
Yeah.
And uncertainty goes up and money values go down, roughly speaking, which means the dollar inflates and the relative cost of Bitcoin actually goes down. It dropped like 45% or something when the Ukrainian conflict started. So,
Really?
oh yeah, it went, boom! It's slowly recovering, but it went down really fast.
Wow. Wow. Well, it must be rush hour now because everybody's in their cars, except for
I
me and
know.
Mark.
Yep, it's rush hour.
It's rush hour. Where are you driving?
Oh, I'm going home.
Okay.
I'm driving on stop and go traffic, so it's gonna be slow enough where I can kind of pay attention.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay.
The only thing I have something about crypto that I always think about is
Okay.
who's gonna people are gonna miss. I don't know. I like holding cash, like lots of cash. There's no like physicality to that, and that just kind of sucks. Like that sucks. I don't know. What are you gonna do? But like what are you gonna do when you're throwing, making it rain? I don't know. There's just gonna be something. Even in Star Wars, there's like that credits thing. And you remember, like
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
have wings, they have
Yeah.
something,
Yeah.
still something. I don't know. I just always found that interesting.
That's a good point. That's an excellent point. I saw a little. Didn't they mint these little Bitcoin coins? I don't know if they were
Yes.
just tokens but they had
No, no,
those.
they're legit. Yeah,
Yeah.
you
They
can
gotta
do
have
that.
something. They gotta have something.
Yeah, no, it is a good point. I wish I had put that in my video. Now I'll have to make another video on money.
There's
But yeah, you'll like my long form, my new one that I released today.
there's
If you're
always
interested.
more to say.
Well, maybe, Paul. Although I would argue that you've got down this whole thing where you've got like 10 minutes of things to say, and you manage to do it in like an hour and 15. And I'm like, I'm glad I don't have hair, because then I have nothing to pull out. But I do love your stuff. Even your long form stuff is great. But yeah,
You say my name just like my cousins do. So when every time you say my name, it's I think about my cousins.
is that good or bad?
That's a good thing. I love my cousins.
Oh,
My cousins in Massachusetts.
well,
Accents
it
are
all
very
makes sense.
subtle things.
Yeah.
I just noticed it now. I thought, oh, it sounds like my cousins. So,
Oh, and I got a new chair. See, got my new office
oh,
chair.
oh, nice chair. Nice
Thanks.
chair.
The old one's in back. It's all ratted up. It's all done.
Okay. Well, what do we want to talk about this afternoon? I got a little bit of time. That's why I come on here and see what people are interested in. It's important to see what people are interested in. 'Cause-
I just wanted to put a face to a name. I've been now here before, and I don't think anybody's seen my face or anything. So.
yeah, and you do ask questions on Friday, and it's I always it's very helpful to put a face to a name, and also you put a location there, Kansas City, Missouri.
You said something about you were talking about anonymity on the internet, and I felt bad. I don't know, like I gotta do something. I just had that name on there or whatever. I don't know. Yeah, my dad always said that if I had a Native American name, it would be Pokes the Bear. So why I that way.
Pokes the Bear. You can still change your name. Just go down, Pokes. That'll be the first name. The middle name, Bear. Pokes the Bear.
Yeah.
How are you, Ginger Bill?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Yeah.
Good. How's life in the UK?
Interesting, at least. I've had a good week, and it's only Wednesday, so yeah.
What's going on in your part of the world?
Things, I guess. I don't want to go too personal with certain things, so we'll just keep it brief.
People there? Do people there?
Call on your Bluetooth phone.
Do people there pay more attention to Ukraine because it's a little closer to you than it is to us?
Well, the COVID stuff is gone, so now people are talking about the COVID stuff.
Okay.
But I've been trying not to pay attention to it because I'm thinking it's just propaganda from all sides, so none of it's going to be useful. So yeah, better just not listen than to listen to falsehoods.
So what are you paying attention to?
Personal life at the moment. I've got many things going on, which is very interesting.
Oh.
So yeah, quite busy. Let's put it that way.
Wow. Usually I get in here and someone's dying to talk about something, and everybody's just sort of relaxed. That's not a bad thing.
I got tons of stuff I could go into, Paul. I try to leave space for, contrary to popular belief, I try to leave space for others. But yeah, I could go on as much as you want, Paul. Just let me know.
Okay, Mark. What's the topic? What should we talk about?
Well, I thought I don't think you read my comment on your part 2 breakdown video with Vervaeke and Peugeot, right? Because I had a lot of juicy stuff in there. But the one thing I've been thinking of a lot lately is, I've got my little fantasy worlds in my head, right? So one of them is, what happens when Paul's a free agent? He can do what he wants. How should he spend his time, sort of thing, right? And so
I'm sorry, he can't. He's a Calvinist. I'm sorry.
Well, look. Let's just.
I'm never free.
We'll break him of his Calvinistic determinism or something, and still keep his Calvinism somehow. It's okay, Bill. We'll figure it out.
So Alvin Plantinga, then, is what you're saying? Yeah. Okay.
Whatever. Like I said, we'll figure it out. But I thought you probably, other than some of your breakdowns like that, Angels Part 2 breakdown with Vervaeke and Peugeot was very good. But I thought probably your best message, like if you had one message that you could do the Peterson thing with, It is this whole idea about the reputation of Jesus being intact and the reputation of the church being in tatters. Like, it just, the more I wrestle with some of these things, I'm like, that is such an excellent point, because it really gets to the root of, I think, where I'd approximate the meaning crisis, is that split between, if you want to put it in more Platonic terms, the ideal and the implementation, or the material, right? Or maybe not quite the material, but the material plus. Because I think that's what's missing from the conversation to some extent, is this, and it's in this book here. It's in Language of Creation, right? It's definitely there. So there's that heaven and the earth, and then there's where's the reality.
We're just gonna get all that same copies of the same book here if we can, yeah.
I hope so.
Somewhere.
So where is the reality? And I think this is the thing people are really struggling with, right? Because you have two camps. There's no reality. It's all sort of blah, right? That's the thing that Vervaeke refers to as nominalism, I think, or maybe the modern version of it. No one's a nominalist. That's just dumb. But I get the point. The point is, there's people that don't believe in absolute truth, for example. And my buddy Jack Vicinich, who runs the Ancient Greece Declassified podcast, talks about this. He actually went. He's a PhD in quote philosophy. Calls himself PhD in ancient philology because he hates modern philosophy, even though he has a PhD in it. He says he went to all these heads of departments of famous universities around the world. He's very well traveled, and he talks to them, and almost all of them said absolute truth doesn't exist. And it's like, oh, so there is a group of people out there that isn't locating an absolute truth, right? They're the heaven first, heaven only, or ideal first, ideal only people, whether they identify that way or not, right? But then your point is that, so the reputation of, we'll say, absolute truth in Jesus or something is intact, but the middle part, because it really is a middle part, which is the church is in the middle, creating reality. Because everybody wants reality to be one thing, and I try to explain to them, no, you're not understanding. Reality isn't this predetermined thing. And I give this great example, and half the people just sort of like shocked and think about it. The other have people rejected immediately. I said, let's assume, and this is likely true, that there's only enough mineral deposits available to us on the Earth to either build a Dyson sphere to encompass the Earth, or a spaceship big enough to take everybody away from the planet. So we only have one of two options. Which one of those is real? And the answer is neither, until you build one, and then only one is real and the other isn't, which is kind of, I think, good evidence that we create reality, or co-create reality. Not that we have control over it. And this is where people get confused. Well, if we create reality, then we should be able to create whatever we want. No. We're co-creating reality, right? But we're involved in the process. So without us, it doesn't unfold. And with us, it doesn't unfold the way we want, which gets back to emergence and emanation, right? And I think that ties nicely into the second part, Angel's discussion that Vervaeke and Peugeot had, right? Because they still, I think, Vervaeke didn't want to acquiesce, even though Peugeot kind of hit that out of the park. Of course, the city talks to me. It sends me a letter, right? Like, problem's done. Your argument's over at that point, right? It really gets to the emanation that Vervaeke doesn't want to deal with. He says emanation, right? It's a Beetlejuice thing. Emanation, and there's emanation, but he doesn't deal with emanation as such. But I think your point about Jesus' reputation being intact and the church's reputation being in tatters goes back to Peterson standing in the middle. This Peugeot said this to him. It's like you're trying to stand in the middle on these two islands that are getting further and further apart. I think those are the islands. The ideas of the sages, the wisdom tradition, Jesus, if you're a Christian, right? Whatever, doesn't even matter, right? You can pick the Eastern traditions. It makes no difference. Versus the idea of the material scientific worldview, and that there's some breakdown in the implementation by the church that it isn't bridging that gap anymore. And that's why what do you need, Paul? You need bridges of meaning. That's what you need. And Joey, the sage, knew this somehow, and that's why he has given us this bridge. How's that for a tie-in? Yes, Bill, you're welcome.
Very impressive.
I just got here and I don't know what this is about, but sure, I did it.
Just go with it, Joey. Just go with it. It's fine. I was just going like, I didn't know where you were going with this, Mark. That's all I was going to say, because it's a bit like, where are you going?
Well, I love the sermonic title. The reputation of Jesus is intact and the church is in tatters. That'll preach.
You're welcome. Feel free to send a check.
I got to get on that whatever subscribe star. I don't know what kind of crazy monetary thing you're on. Well, here's Father Eric. Speaking of crazy monetary things.
He listens to my
Churches
channel.
want more than just money.
Father Eric listens to my channel. That's why he gets custom videos made just on the topics he wants.
Small systems could be hijacked easily.
It's true. He's not wrong.
Well, I think that's
subs?
I think that's a great topic, though, Mark. Why is the reputation of Jesus intact and the reputation of the church in tatters?
It's one of your best videos, Paul. Honestly, when you went through that whole thing, I thought it was great. I've been thinking about it ever since it was months ago, right? It's 3 or 4 months ago now.
I'd love to hear what more of you have to think about that question. Why is the reputation of Jesus intact and the reputation of the church in tatters?
I wonder if the reputation of Jesus is intact to a lot of people. I don't know. I think a lot of people, or even if it is, like, people see him in a favorable light, they misconstrued him in all sorts of ways, you know? The pastor at a church that I grew up always talked about, like, he had several examples. Like everybody wants, like, a warrior Jesus, a boyfriend Jesus, some type of... And so even if it's favorable, like a boyfriend Jesus, it's still not intact. It's not... I don't know. It's really misconstrued.
Well, and hi, I'm going to introduce myself real quick, and then I'll say something. Alan Hill is my name. I'm in Tucson, Arizona.
Yeah.
I've been lurking on Paul's videos for years and following this for a while. I've just never actually had the time or inclination to actually dive in.
Well, thanks for joining.
I'm glad I saw that this came up. I was wondering, as far as the boyfriend Jesus goes, how far back does this kind of assigning Jesus into the very particular role that you want actually go? I remember sometime in the late 90s, Conan O'Brien had a bit with these little collectibles that he apparently bought on the internet. They like had soccer player Jesus and buddy Jesus and all these different little ceramic roles for Jesus to play. Mostly just kitsch, but I'm wondering, why would that kitsch be well received in the culture? And how long has this been happening where we don't really have a solid understanding of who we think Jesus is? So we just start having words for us. It doesn't feel like
Yeah.
Materialist Christians confirmed.
What'd you say, Mark?
Materialist Christians confirmed. Like, that's a big problem. The materialism that sneaks into Christianity and boom.
So what you're saying is Mormonism is bad, Mark? What are you saying? Oh. So I'm just trying to be really edgy now. I don't know why.
What time is it there, Bill?
I'm gonna annoy everyone just with bad jokes tonight. Hopefully
It's
that's
too
okay.
late for us, Bill. I think that's it. It's too late.
Yeah, it probably is.
Are you in Europe, Cassidy?
Right now, yes.
You visiting?
Although I'm back in the U.S. in April
Oh, okay.
for a little bit.
Okay.
I think Jesus, that Conan O'Brien kitschy Jesus thing you just shared with us, I think that shows pretty clearly that to the secular world, Jesus is really just like he's just joined the pantheon of the fairy tales. He's just another silly little thing that the old world has given to us, and oh wow, isn't it quaint and stupid? The cross, all of the horror, it's just been completely somehow obliterated by this culture, which takes nothing seriously.
I'm going to put in here, and I would say, what reputation? Because I don't think it's good or bad. I think for many people, it's non-existent. And I mean, literally, and I don't mean that as a. No. It's kind of neutral in that regard. So when you say, okay, the church, everyone knows what the church is because they can just look at it. But Jesus, sometimes they don't have no idea. And I'm not saying to you missionaries come out and go and tell people about Jesus or anything like that nonsense. But what I'm just trying to say is that I think viewing it from what many people, they don't even think about Jesus. So there's no reputation, good or bad.
Is that a difference between the US and the UK, let's say?
Because US is a lot more religious. The UK is quite secular. It's very common to people just be atheists.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if they are religious, they're not Christian. They'll be some other religion. They're like Muslim or Hindu or Sikh.
But I have a question about that. Go ahead.
I was going to ask Bill if he thought that there are also more people in the US who are anti-religious versus in Europe. Do you think there's more of like that vitriol?
I'd say, I don't know. Because if you go with the anti-religious, it's usually, say, the new atheist crowd, usually. And they're the new atheists. But the new atheists, my view is that the people they're arguing against are the same camp. They are both materialists. Well, to be technical, they are reductive physicalists, just not to annoy them. But in the sense they're arguing against the same camp. Like when you talk with like Richard Dawkins, and he was talking to people which is called idiot creationists, effectively. And it was like this, how could you not do all this? And it's just, well, the thing is their metaphysics are effectively the same. It's just they've got this woo on top, and then like those going, we don't like the woo. Go away, woo. It's just stupid woo. But that's who they're arguing. Because one of my favorite kind of like quotes, I say that's a quote, this is a story that Richard Dawkins used to tell, and he was talking with the Archbishop of Canterbury at the time, which is Rowan Williams. And he remembered talking to Rowan was like, Rowan was such a, he was literally praising how smart he was. And he even said, this will show you kind of Richard Dawkins' view at the time. I'm not saying he's now. It was more like, Rowan Williams knew my position so well, he could explain it better than me. And then this is what he would say straight after him. I don't understand why he doesn't believe it then. And it's kind of like Richard Dawkins didn't have the thing like, wait, if he knows your positions very well, maybe he's got a good reason why he doesn't believe it. But he was at that point, like, but he knows it so well. I'm like, I don't get it. Clearly, I think he's probably, I don't know if he's matured or not from that point. It was just, I always found that very funny.
Part of why I sort of set those two things up against each other is that maybe it's because I work in the church space, and we certainly hear a lot of complaining about church. And if I'm engaging people, the video today, I did it mostly on Rousseau out of Carl Trueman's book. I thought the chapter I listened to on this morning's walk, I thought was quite helpful. But then I sort of bounced it off this Brian Houston story of this founding pastor of Hillsong, which is this celebrity megachurch, which of course gets a lot of visibility, had to step back because of, he was, I guess he had a problem with some pills, and was sort of lost a little control over his faculty and was texting one of his staffers, and and so people will often note the reputational problems of the church. But even I seldom run into atheists or even non-Christians who have dismissive or negative things to say about Jesus. Maybe they're being nice, but even my new atheist friends, or not my new atheist friends, but my new age friends, I mean, Jesus is just one of the options up there. So I don't know. Maybe I have it wrong, but the reputation of Jesus still seems to be better than the reputation of the church. Even
there's
though
one of the reasons you can read the Bible, you can read the Gospels, and you can just read them directly, like and see what he did. So it's not like, this is the thing, is for many people that say, oh, we can just go directly to the source rather than have to listen to what the church is telling you what to believe.
So they're all Protestants.
I mean, Jesus has an almost 2,000-year history of not getting into any new scandals. So he's really done a good job of keeping the bad stuff out of the news.
Hey, he did use a whip to get people out, so maybe we're going to learn from that.
Where the church has not done as good of a job on that. And I think part of the problem with that framing is it's called the church. Father Eric can obviously call his church the church because that's kind of how the Catholicism works. But I get that all the time when I talk to people. They talk about their complaints with the church. What the heck is the church? Because you have a church. Father Eric has a different church. All these other people on here, they're going to all different churches if they're going to church at all. A lot of people think that your Sunday sermons on YouTube are their church. So what's the church? And maybe, ironically, maybe the church should lean into that a little bit more, because that seems to be more sustainable in the modern world. Once you're a big institution, once you're something that's an example to others, the modern reaction is to try and take you down, to try and snipe you, to try and cause problems via isometric warfare of attention. Like they're going to go, like, I don't think that the average Christian wants to spend 6 days of their week arguing with atheist YouTubers about why Christianity is good or bad. Like, some people should do that, sure, but most Christians shouldn't do that. They should go out and they should do their good works. They should take care of their family. They should, they should do the important things that make admirable Christians admirable. The important thing that makes admirable Christians admirable is not that they have the best writings and the best philosophy and the best takes on Jesus and the most accurate historical context and everything like that. Obviously, some people need to do that work, and it's good work, fine. But most Christians are admirable because they're Christian, and through their faith, it inspires them to do good. And that's not what recruiting for Christianity looks like. Recruiting for Christianity looks like trying to imitate whatever the culture is doing this week and adapting every single time. And like that, I just got into an argument on the Protestant channel on our server of saying pretty much exactly that. That's what I find most admirable about Christians. And what I don't find admirable about Christians is like when Ken Ham tries to hop into another realm, the realm of science, and argue for Christianity in that way. Like, I don't think that needs to happen. Chris Ham, if he wants to, he can start a theme park and run a theme park, and that's fine. I don't care that he does that. I'm not saying it makes him a bad guy, but like, if Christians want to hop into a realm that's not based on faith, they will be out-competed in that realm because the real power is the faith. It's not Christianity plus the flavor of the week.
Christians are not supposed to be. They're not supposed to be lawyers for Christ. They're fishers of men, and because the lawyer for Christ thing, it doesn't work very well.
I've got to assume that God and Jesus kind of have their own stuff figured out, and maybe you should focus more immediate stuff. But
I like that. When's Joey going to be the guest pastor at the church there? Because that was a hell of a sermon right there, Paul. I think Father Eric's going to convert. We're in. We got it. If you can bring the Catholics to you, then
both hands up in the air, just sway.
That was really good. That was really good. That's clippable. I might make a clip of that.
Please.
That was very good. Well, part of what listening to you talk, Joey, is the fact that when I read the New Testament, and because I'm in the Gospels right now, building up to Holy Week coming up, one of the things that comes through quite clearly that most people, in terms of the reputation of Jesus, don't understand was that Jesus had a bad enough reputation that culture war enemies who couldn't agree on much could both agree that the world was better without him, and so they killed him. And so and this is sort of Tom Holland's point, part of what's happened in the last 2,000 years is that our assumptions about basically the good and evil, that we don't see sort of the background noise, have changed so dramatically that this certainly gets into this question. And the reason that when Christians stop trying to lawyer for Jesus and try harder to do what Jesus told them to do, which is love their neighbor all the way up to and including their enemies, people look at Christians and say, I don't necessarily believe what they believe, but I'm glad they're around and I'm okay living next door to them. So it's interesting how this 2,000 years of how Jesus changed the world impacts the reputational dynamics, and of course how the church continues to fail to live up to it.
Paul, I got a question for you. Does this happen to you when people find out you're a pastor, let's say on the street or the grocery store or whatever, they tell you everything they think about religion in like 4 sentences?
Well, much to Jacob's chagrin, I haven't put on that beautiful collar he gave me, which he'd really like me to walk around with in the street in.
Well, is it a dog collar? Proper dog collar?
No, it's just like Eric's. It's just like Father Eric's collar. So I seldom get outed as a pastor, but when that does happen, mostly what they say to me is if they comment on it, they pretty much say something more similar to what Joey just ran through, that, well, it's usually, well, I'm glad there's churches around to do stuff for like homeless people and poor people and to make grieving people feel better. And I'm sure you're one of the good churches and not one of the bad ones. And that all depends, of course, exactly on what they imagine the good churches and the bad churches are.
Well, the first thing they do when they walk up to you too, Paul, is they look up because you're larger than they are. So I don't think a lot of people are walking up to you to talk smack, basically.
No, that's true.
Start there. But also, I mean, there's a way that you carry yourself and handle yourself that is very unlike the negative experiences that people who have had in church in the past. The argument against the church, the popular argument against the church, is that they're the nannies and they want to tell you what to do and when to do it and how to do it and who to do it with. And, that's intrusive. And, well, I'm an American. I don't like that. I want to stay away from that, that attitude. And, then they hate that attitude. But I mean, I would argue that probably most of the churches aren't like that. And I don't know, the people that do still argue like that, now that I've been exposed to so many Christians that I will call more sophisticated, the people that got to get in your face about it and be angry about it, it comes off more and more to me every day as their own personal insecurities. And they need you to believe in Jesus, maybe because they don't really, and I can't say that to them because then they will punch me. And if they need to punch me to defend Jesus, then do they really believe in Jesus that much? Maybe that's kind of proving my point. Like, it kind of goes in that circle, and I'm just saying that Paul has a much better feedback loop of a more positive, more accepting, just more productive church doing what I think a church should do. But my opinion doesn't matter because I'm not part of one. So,
Billy, I would say it's probably not that they don't believe; it's that they're really scared not to. It's like there's something in them that believes that, but there's so many people telling them they're idiots for it. that there's that part of them that's afraid of what it will do if they don't. And so there's usually two ways. Leave it or double down. Very few people take the middle road.
And if people got a devil inside them, and the only way to keep that devil back is by believing in a Jesus and the kind of Jesus that gets angry when somebody tries to insult them, then yeah, I'll take that compared to them acting out the devil. I'm talking symbolically, of course, not literally, but maybe I'm not. I don't know.
Well, I think for a lot of people who are getting angry in that fashion, it's about identity more than it is belief or faith. It's not really because they're trying to proselytize or persuade anybody. It's that don't attack their identity. This is part of who they are, and if you deny it, you're a threat.
Yeah, that's that pervasive materialism sneaking in.
There's always the other bit that always makes me laugh when you say someone's an atheist, and usually some of the atheists are the most religious people I've ever met. As in, they'll say, "Oh, things happen for a reason. Oh, if it didn't go that way, it's all right. It happened for a reason after that." And they'll say all these things, and it's just you just stop and laugh because it's like, I don't know how else to phrase it, but sometimes the most religious people I meet are the most secular as well. Yeah. It's like, yeah, fine, it's all that, and they just carry on. It's like there's nothing else. It's just part of it. What are you talking about? I don't know how to frame it. It's just I'm not religious, but I'll talk about all this spiritual stuff.
Yeah. Well, it's probably unavoidable, right? If religion is the condition of humans and the way which we relate to it, we'll say post 1530 definition, because prior to 1530, religion didn't mean that at all, right? Which is kind of good to know. It's good to know, right? Then we're just talking about something that's inevitable. Like, it's inevitable that people are going to be peopling, as we talked about earlier, Paul. If you just get the people to stop peopling, we'd be all set. So if that's inevitable, and religion is the framework that talks about that does roughly what people think modern philosophy does, which it absolutely does not, then you can see the split is really around this primary material versus primary ethereal, right? Or primary spirit, right? And then the reason why the church is sitting in the middle with a bad reputation is because science has told everybody very clearly, in no uncertain terms, that you can have the thing you want perfectly. Like, science doesn't report on imperfect results. It may lie. It does that quite a bit.
I disagree with that, but it depends on which science you're talking about. But yeah.
Well, yeah, but generally, Bill, right? There's the replication crisis. Right?
No, but what I mean is actually there's different things. So there's actual science. I'm not necessarily defending academia here, but there's the science that people see in the media.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah,
I agree. But that science, but real science too, right? Like, most scientists are going to die unsuccessful. Period. End of statement.
Yeah, but most people do. Every single profession, the vast majority of people will be, let's put it this way, tragic. But that's great. Isn't that lovely? The lovely life this is.
It is.
But then you got to wonder with things like the people who are successful, they're just the weirdos. And yeah, you have to realize how weird they are. Because, like, not joking, like, it's just even physicists, most of the famous physicists, they're all bleeming weirdos. Like, every single one of them. Let's take, I don't know, Heisenberg, Schrodinger, the guy who came up say Schrodinger equation in quantum mechanics. He was a polygamist, effectively. And the reason he came up with the equation, as I've told the story for, he went into a log cabin for a few weeks with his wife and his mistress, and then came back, and they figured it out. Or the other ones, for instance, von Neumann, the polymath, physicist, mathematician, computer scientist, effectively. He was just very rigid. He once someone came along was trying to make an assembler, so like a little programming language. And he went, that's not how you program. You just got to do it with the machine code. That's real programming. What are you talking about? And all these weird oddities you're doing. Like, he told someone off writing language. No, you're supposed to make machine code directly. All these, you literally name a scientist, they'll be weird. The famous ones, they're not normal.
Right, but the real message that we get is not that. We get the message of perfection, of this achievable way through materiality, pure materiality, that we can have this perfection. And so now there's no middle ground anymore, right? Like, the perfection actually exists in the spiritual realm, right? It exists ethereally in the realm of Plato's forms. That's where the perfection is. That's the timeless, not subject to entropy stuff, That's where it all is. That's all that stuff is there. Everything else in physicality and materiality is subject to entropy. So it's imperfect automatically right off the bat. And the church is supposed to be in the middle of those things. And we're such binary thinkers. We don't have a middle anymore. And so the church is not providing us, Paul and Father Eric, with perfection, damn it. And that's what we want.
Mark, I'm right here. What are you talking about?
You weren't provided by the church because you're an atheist. So that's what I'm talking about. But if you were an atheist. So
still, I'm now perfect. What are you talking about?
If Paul and Eric had you as a baby,
actualized potential. Oh,
like I'm just saying, if they had birthed you as a baby, then I would have to agree with you. But I think that's part of it. The recession of the church is important in this whole thing because it's receded from the middle position where it's reaching down and doing good works. And I'll say it again because I can't say this enough. And I only found this out recently. All the hospitals in South Carolina are run by the church. All of them. And now none of them are. They're all gone. Like, get on it, Father Eric. Like, come on. And that's what I mean by the recession of the church. It's receding. It's no longer taking in the homeless in the way that it used to. It's no longer providing charity in the way that it used to. Thank you very much, George W. Bush. That's his fault, for sure. It's no longer running hospitals. It's no longer involved in these things. We don't have monasteries to take in the mentally ill and to provide the education. It's no longer involved in education. The Catholic schools were closing left, right, and center in New England, where there were a ton of them. When I was growing up, it's receded. It's absolutely receded from the everyday person. So it's giving up the middle ground, and now we've got things rushing in, right? My three great religions, safety, climate, and race, right? Rushing in as religions. There's more of them, right? And they're endless. There's going to be more of them. I'm just trying to fill the gap that the church has left by receding.
Wow. We had Ginger Bill as the love child between me and Father Eric. Now we have Father Eric's call to go to the Carolinas and start owning the hospitals. Wow.
I think Eric's only about my age as well. So
yeah, I'm wondering. I'll go do that. Mark.
Weird mechanics going on there.
So far, we've only been talking about the the institutional dimension of the church. Like, or do you see this as also speaking of the spiritual dimension of the church, or is there not a difference there? Because the way I see things, the church is, the institutional church is always going to be fallen. There's always going to be scandal, as is the case with every institution. But the spiritual dimension of the church, that's the body of the truly faithful, like the saints, like the people who actually are doing the work of Christ, and that tradition has never died. That aspect of the church will never die.
Well, to some extent, but look, I mean, I think this is the problem. Why is the reputation of Jesus intact? Because and not attached to the church anymore? Because I think that's part of the problem. And I think Bishop Barron said this best in the Four Horsemen of Meaning talk, right, with Gibson and Vervaeke and Peugeot, where he admitted, he actually said this. They flattened out the church. The Catholics flattened out the church, Father Eric, right? They flattened them out. You're a proxy for the good and the bad now, buddy. Sorry. Flattened it out, right? They took away the icon. So they're not bringing the higher down. Oh, there we go. Okay. There we go. Good. That's excellent. That's where you got to be. Right. But they're not bringing it down. They have to bring it down. They have to bring it down, and they have to bring it all the way down into materiality and implement the material things to do what Joey was talking about, which is living the Christian life and exemplifying it every day so that people go, these guys, yeah, I guess I'm okay with them. They're not trying to, and look at the names. Look at the names. So there's a big talk with rationality rules. What is that? How did it... Rationality rules? And it's stunning to me. Have you read the science on rationality and humans? It's not good.
I'm not going to defend rationality rules at all here, but Stephen Woodford.
Yeah.
you just can remember he started. It's the new atheist thing, so it's just edginess, and they all just. Okay, this is now going to criticize new atheists in general, but they call themselves the reasons they were rationalists, but then they say they're empiricists, and I'm thinking, you don't know what the definition of either of those terms mean,
Right.
But let's not go there. So no, we put reasonable things. It's like they're all over the place. It's kind of funny because there are some philosophers who are new atheists, like Daniel Dennett's a good one, who does know actual his philosophy, and he'll even call out stuff like saying, "Yeah, I reject this, yeah." But I do find it funny that, like, I don't know how to put it. They talk about all these criticisms, all these, like I say, rationality rules is a good example, like all these logical fallacies, and I'm thinking, you're making contradictions yourself all the time, and you don't ever usually self-reflect. There was actually the other day, they had a live stream, him with what is his name? It goes by Digital Gnosis, Nathan Orman.
The Exile.
10-hour live stream criticizing Jordan Peterson. Two things. I'm like, first off, it was a bit weird because it had a picture of Jordan Peterson, Jonathan Peugeot, and Paul Vanderklee on the thumbnail. I was like, wow, they're going to criticize Paul and John. And I went, no, it was just Pete. It was just Jordan Peterson. And it went on for 10 hours. And I'm thinking, okay, I don't have that. I've got something better to do on my Saturday, but okay, if they don't. But it was just kind of weird. And I just flicked through it. I was like, okay, what's their criticisms? I'm thinking, oh, they're just criticism when he's just saying something wacky. Great. Okay.
A lot of this, there's two things with the whole sort of apologetics movement on both sides, because basically a lot of these people are apologists for non-theism. Oh, I'm so tired. Sorry. The first is, a lot of it is operating in the conversation with the same spirit on different sides of the argument. So a lot of the criticisms that they have against the other person, it's like, well, that cuts both ways. So yeah, you're right. You know, this might be true on one side, but it's also true on the other. And it's hard to kind of put that mirror to yourself. But it's also often built on a lot of things you're against, of spending all this time building arguments on things you're not for. And if you do that for long enough, like, you've got nothing left to stand on. And I don't think it's actually a valuable project, because it's not putting value into the world and helping people orient themselves. It's throwing things out. And it's why I've moved away from spending so much time in those circles, because I'd rather be watching people and collaborating with people who want to move towards things.
Well, and I really appreciate what both Mark and Joey had to say in terms of, he's right in that it is the job of the church to bring this stuff up here down to earth. And obviously the church has to do some talking, because part of being with people is talking, but a lot of this is attempting to manifest the love of God and love of neighbor. I mean, when the church does that well, I won't say it's always celebrated, because there are always some neighbors that are inconvenient to celebrate, because there are always status hierarchies and people who are on the top and people who are on the bottom. And I would argue that the reason Jesus was killed was because he, in many ways, quite radically participated in loving some unfortunate people. And as it turns out, when the 60s came along, people sort of liked that side of Jesus, but Jesus also tends to also deal with the other side as well. And so he's almost always in trouble with somebody, but because he also isn't just a quivering mass of availability. He also has things to say to others and people usually who are closest to him. I mean, he's hardest on Pharisees and disciples. And in terms of the culture war of his day, he's probably closest to the Pharisees than anyone else in the picture. He's not an Essene and he's not a zealot. So, but I think you're right, Mark, and I think you have a good way of putting that together in terms of bringing it down, and what Joey said as well.
Thank you. Well, that's your fault, Paul. So you can blame yourself for my better articulation of these issues. You and Peugeot in particular, right? Because that's really where I'm drawing on this some of this framework from, right? So when the Vervaeke framework is great for understanding meaning, the science of meaning. Science is awesome. Love science, real science, scientific method type science. But the emanation and emergence it all breaks down there. And then, a point of branding, though, really cannot remember the book you guys read from because it's got one title and no author. Like, you need a longer title and then an author that I can really, because, memory works that way, right? The more points of reference you have, the easier it is to remember.
It is the best-selling, most duplicated book in all of human history. I don't think the Bible needs a lot more. I mean, people are putting free copies in hotel rooms, for Pete's sake.
But all the money these days is in sequels.
Yeah, why is there no Bible 2?
Right. Where's the sequel?
That's the Book of Mormon.
Yeah.
That's it.
Marvel and DC are able to keep raising the stakes with every single movie, and it's been a couple of years now, and they haven't come out.
Actually, guys, the sequel is coming.
Oh,
the sequel.
Be careful what you ask for.
What you ask for.
It's literally going to be Jesus back.
Jesus
for
Part
vengeance.
2.
Riding a white horse, slaying his enemies with the sword of his mouth. So you just have to wait. It's taken forever in production.
Like that Johnny Cash song. I love that guy. Jesus should take more place from Johnny Cash.
Oh.
So, Paul, have we ruined everything yet?
No, it's great. Again, I come here because I want to hear your thoughts, and I always learn. I mean, I talk my thoughts into the camera all the time. I don't need to do that here. I'm much better off when I learn from all of you. And
yeah, we've got to get you on message, Paul, for bringing what's highest down in the practicality realm here. In it, maybe in an environment that can actually do that. Because I only have Father Eric to call on for hospitals, because I think that's the only force that has enough.
Hey, look, what you need to do, like we did in our country, just turn the hospital into the religion.
That's what I keep hearing about the UK.
Yeah,
that's exactly what I keep hearing.
Anyone who disagrees with it then will just start trying to defend their religion. It's usually quite obvious straight away. It's like, it's not a religion. And then you start criticizing it and like, oh, how dare you? Do you want to be like they'll just use the same propaganda techniques. Like, do you want to be like the US and everything? I'm like, so what about Netherlands or France or Germany or Switzerland? Do you know any of their systems? And then they'll just go, no. And it's like, means you don't know what you're talking about then. You just don't know. Oh, you don't know what your sermons have told you. Yes.
But to push back a little bit, Mark, on the hospital thing. I mean, part of what now I'll get into some of my Dutch Calvinism and Kuyperian. Part of what happens in the world in Christendom is that many of these things were sort of outsourced away from the clergy, and it's very interesting. I'd be curious to hear what Father Eric has to say about this too, because of course Kuyper in the Netherlands had his pillarization, where you really don't want the preachers in charge of the hospitals. I mean, you really don't, because it wouldn't go well. And even for the Dutch Calvinists in the U.S., we don't even have the preachers in charge of the schools. We usually have some kind of combination of parents and people who have expertise, experience, and degrees in education. And so to that degree, once we already colonized the culture that taking care of sick people was an important thing, well, then we could continue to go on our work and let the hospitals continue to do it. Now, when they completely fail, maybe we'll have to go back and do it again. But it's actually a strategy of continued colonization.
I would agree with that. Perhaps adding that the church, in the broadest sense, has been rather successful over the past multi-hundred years in moving values into government. And as soon as the government has within it these values that you have to take care of the poor and you have to, make these services available for everyone, whether they can afford to pay or not, they effectively take it away from the church. And there's nothing the church is going to do to get that specific thing back until the government abandons it, because there's tax dollars behind it. It's mandatory. It's not going to go anywhere. Now, there are things you can do, and that I think the church probably should be doing to supplement that. But the idea of actually opening up and running the hospitals, at least in the U.S., the way our system works, is just not going to happen. And there are still, a lot of church-affiliated hospitals, but actually, providing those sorts of services, it's precluded by just all the red tape, all the systems. Even if a church with the resources wanted to start to do it, it would be almost impossible to do it effectively. And I'm just mostly this is just based on my knowledge of history and law. Yeah.
So I was about to put in. All I was about to say was that this may sound like a very weird way, but please don't take it the wrong way. When you have the separation of church of state, the state becomes the church. And I'm not saying there should be one. What I'm saying is that for many people, that's what happens, because then they want the state to do even more than what the thing that church is. Because if you notice, literally just the 20th century is a good example of this. What the church used to do, the state has now taken up, and it's just taken up more and more and more. And that's why you've got literally encroachment everywhere. And then people will then revere the state in itself, where instead of having it like what it used to do, like I say not minor things, but certain things which the church wouldn't have done. But that's why for many people they will idolize politicians or certain rulers, such like this, because they are treating it like a church. They're treating it like a religion. They're not treating it like, oh, this is the bit that provides the police or the military or the, I don't know, whatever they're doing for the thing. Here's the people who do the courts and such. It's like, okay. It's someone's like, no, these are the people helping people out. This is what we need to do. And it's like this. And it's, I think, I don't know what's the better way of putting it, but it does seem to be this. It's 20th century is pretty much when it's all happened, because before that, the church had a big, massive role doing all this stuff, and then the secularization and socialization of everything happened effectively. And I mean socialization. I mean socialism. All three blends. This is the kind of the outcome of liberalism. Is they had three different forms of it. They had liberal socialism, which is where they were planners and they were trying to scientifically plan stuff. Then you got the Marxists, and then you got the fascists, and they all come from the same root. They're all from like the liberal tradition, which is where that's going to make people sound horrible. I'm like, but that's what they are, and that's kind of what's happening. They've like completely, all three of them effectively said, screw the church, and that's what you get as a result. Sorry, I'm wrong.
I think the people, for a lot of these things, the people generally would prefer to get them from government.
No,
unless you're part of the church. The reason I say that is because getting it from government, it's not charity. It's something that you are entitled to by virtue of whatever you believe it is that makes you entitled to it. So if it's charity, inherently you're undeserving. You haven't earned it. And you might feel some obligation. And with the government, there is none of that.
Well, that's
exactly.
That's the modern, that's the modern argument in the United States. And that's how they got the churches out of the charity business, was by saying, oh, they're preaching. And then the churches stopped preaching, actually, which I think was a mistake, right? Like, because there is a trade there. And we don't recognize the trade because we think money is material. I have 2 videos on that, on navigating patterns, just in case anybody's curious.
Your YouTube channel?
Navigating patterns, just in case. Right. But I think that's it. Like, what is the trade? The trade isn't we force you to listen to our sermon in exchange for services. The trade is we give you a window into that upper register, to use Pastor Paul Vanderklay's language here, right? We give you a window into that upper register.
Very important.
And that's the trade, is we show you glory, grace, whatever else. I'm not a Christian. I don't know. You guys tell me, right? We're showing you all this stuff, the glory of God, the grace that's available from Jesus, whatever it is, right? And that's the trade, is that we get to show you this as part of giving you this service, right? And I don't buy the postmodern government narrative, right? I mean, I'm still three principalities, roughly speaking, right? So you've got the
What's the
principality.
postmodern government narrative?
Well, the government's taken it over, and therefore the church can't take it back. That's not.
I was not
The
making that
church
claim,
isn't
by the
out
way.
of it either at all.
No, it's not. That's part of the point. It's not out of it at all. And down here, there are some Christian-y groups that have like insurance plans and stuff that are really, really cheap compared to the stuff you can buy from the government, which is ridiculously expensive and completely unfair. But I'm still three principalities, right? You've got the principality of whatever it is, God in this case, right? The principality of the government and the principality of trade or commerce or money, right? And they have that's the hierarchy, right? Highest to lowest. And the highest needs to take back more of its stuff, right? It needs to take back, because I don't think it was given over to the government once the government adopted values. I think that's a total misread of history. I think basically the destruction of the monasteries, particularly in Bill's country, was a big part of losing all of this, ability to be the center of the community, both in spiritual wealth and in educational or learning wealth, right? But also in taking care of the sick people, making sure the poor got fed, right? All of the government services that we take for granted, today, were done by monasteries. And the church has lost the monastery.
Yeah, but as I know, I say English history a bit more than it was American. I know in this country that even until the 60s, most of the hospital stuff was done by the church, but it was a specific effort from the governments, people in power, to stop that. Like, they were the people, and I'm just they were Fabians. These were the Fabians. They were the socialists, socialists. The Fabians, their literal logo was a wolf in sheep's clothing. It still is. It's kind of like the irony's not lost on them. And this is kind of the interesting thing, but that's kind of what they did. They were trying to secularize everything. This is what we're trying to do, get rid of the stuff. And I'm not saying that I'm trying to say the church should have that role. This is what it should be doing, because effectively that's what's done historically. If you actually start thinking about what the church did, most things are now what the state did. But when I was criticizing the people earlier, I was just saying that no. When you ask people which one they prefer, they only know one option. They don't know any other options. They think, oh no, the church is just helping out on certain little tragedy things. I'm like, no, the church used to do a ton of stuff in the past, and you only know what the stuff is happening now because that's what you're used to. It's like, of course that the government gives this thing. It's like also the question when you hear people say, oh, I hate lobbying and stuff. Why is it so? Why do people have to all do all this lobbying? It's like, what are you trying? We need to make more laws to stop all the lobbying and stuff like all this. It's like, why people wouldn't need to lobby if the state didn't do everything?
Right. No, it's a good.
This is kind of the funny thing.
And you're right. Nobody knows. I mean, when I was growing up in New England, you did know there were certain hospitals that you went to because they were church run, and A, they cost less, and B, they wouldn't come after you and take your house. Like, it was that simple. But not everybody knew about them. I mean, all the Catholic and Catholic, circling people like myself who, I wasn't forced to go to, I didn't know anything about this silly church thing. I just knew all my family was traumatized by the Catholics, right? That's all I knew. So, but I knew about those churches. But most people didn't know that. They didn't know, oh, you can get that operation done at this hospital. It'll be half the cost. You'll get better care. And, if it takes you 10 years to pay for it, they're oddly okay with it. Like, they're not going to charge you. And when they did charge interest, their interest rates were like 3% or something stupid in the age when interest rates were 12,
Part of that story is the absolute collapse of women's religious orders in the United States in the 1960s and the decades following. Because it used to be we had religious sisters coming out of our ears, right? There would be like, for every one priest you have, you'd have 3 religious sisters. And they were the ones running the schools, the hospitals,
Yep.
you know. The priests were lazy. Like, they'd just sit around, they'd say mass, they'd bark at the people, and then they'd go sit in their house and watch TV unless somebody was bothering them. And part of the benefits of a religious sister is they take a vow of poverty. They had tiny rooms. All you needed to pay for them was room and board, clothing, a toothbrush,
Yep.
their own medical care. All that stuff was cheaper then, and versus a salaried nurse, which would be like, I don't know, in modern salaries, $65,000-$70,000. I don't know.
Nurses get good money.
That's good money. I won't complain.
They make really good money, especially in Boston. No, I can confirm that, Father Eric, because I have relatives. I don't know if I don't think they're great aunts. They might be great aunts once removed, who were sisters in the nunnery, and great fudge. Like, that's love visiting them.
Sorry, I wasn't sure where you were going with this. Great fudge. Okay, that's where it's going.
Well, they spoke French. They were all French Canadians, right? So I could barely understand them at times.
Wow.
But
so that's
this is a great conversation, because I'm really interested in what happened in the UK, and makes perfect sense. I mean, part of what happened, I've been sort of tracking some of this story in the US, because it was with Roosevelt in World War II that, in a sense, okay, well, we've got to bring in the Jews and the Catholics. And of course, after the Second World War, you had this important book, Protestant, Catholic, Jew. And the reason was because mainline Protestant and establishment Protestantism was the religion of the country. And that was able to sort of convert that into a secularism. And so you didn't need to pledge belief to all sorts of ideas or confessional items in order to participate in this system. And then, of course, with continued globalization, you've got other religions coming in. So things continue to develop, and to the point we are now. Yet it's interesting in the UK, where the number of people who go to church has dropped to such a point that I think churches sort of, okay, let's delegate this thing all out to people, especially with the professionalizations of industries. Delegate, all these different people will do these different things, and the church will just sort of sit on top and just point and tweak now and then the whole system will run. And of course, that is completely broken down. Also, after the Second World War, even in as late as the 60s, you still had clergy. Still in the United States, you will still have a prayer at the inaugural, but this has been changing. What's probably most interesting is that there are openings now for Catholics that there haven't been for, almost all of American history. I mean, Catholic stock has been rising. And
apparently your president's Catholic.
The president's Catholic. How many on the Supreme Court? The Catholics are taking over. Going to trigger some of that Protestant anxiety. And here's Mark. Mark's in Carolinas trying to bring him down south. There's an organization in the South that used to be very dangerous for Roman Catholics. The people don't remember that about, the history of the South either.
No. One thing you were saying about churchgoers in the UK, I think remember the statistic was like 10% of people who say they're Christian only go to church. Only 10%.
Yeah.
And but the funny thing is that you will hear this view like, oh, that's a person, he's a churchgoer, isn't he? As if this is a derogatory term. Because the reason why is that people are usually of that type. Not always, but usually they're of a certain personality. They're the ones that are. I can't think of a good way of phrasing it at all, ever. But it's like, I know the type when I see it. Yes, they're very usually friendly, but they're overly friendly. And they're always like, to the point where you're like, that's a bit creepy.
Like you got a lot of Ned Flanders over there?
Sorry, say that again?
I said you got a lot of Ned Flanders over there, or what?
Yes, it's like a Ned Flanders stereotype, effectively, yes.
No,
but that's kind of thing.
In England, that's like, no, that's too much niceness.
Yeah, that's
saying
the
hi
point.
on the street.
Niceness is not like an English thing usually. It's like I remember when going to America once, and everyone was just so nice. I thought this was just weird, not polite. They're not saying like "hello, how you doing?" Like, no, hello, and it's the over the top. It was like, what are you trying to sell me? Go away. Which is very American. You try and sell things all the time. Yeah,
Find them to be unctuous.
yeah, but no, I guess that's the thing. That's kind of always like a churchgoer kind of thing. Like, it is a weird stereotype, but that's probably how I was kind of my viewing it. Clearly, as bringing up, but. And I'm not saying those people are bad people or anything like that. It's just that's probably why many people don't go to church, because it's like, I don't want to be like that type of person.
Interesting.
I think this all kind of goes back to what Joey was saying about the way Christianity changes people and makes you live. And I think maybe that's why even in our institutional senses, we've lost sight of what Christianity actually has the power to do, because we've lost sight of how it changes us individually. And even churches and individuals are so focused on the bigger frames and the institutions, as opposed to how to live that out in the community yourself, and how can you do what you can in your communities.
Well, Jonathan Peugeot said something very interesting. I think it was in Q&A, although it might have been somewhere else, because I do all the Jonathan Peugeot now for sure. But he said he doesn't like it when Peterson uses the term individual. And he said, because the Christian term is person. And I've been railing against individualism. Like individualism and Satan seem to be fairly well related to each other. I don't know. Maybe they're the same thing. I'm just saying, because, well, Peugeot's definition of person was very interesting, because a person and an individual are not the same at all. And I was talking to John Mullen. I know he was on, I think, the last live stream, right, Paul? He's an interesting guy, working on some interesting books. You know, and I said, individualism is bad. But he said, he listened to the Peugeot's point, and he said, well, that's what I mean by person. And I'm like, yeah, but that's not what everybody else means. Like, person.
What video is this, Mark?
I think it's in his Q&A, his last Q&A, which is like 2 hours long. I think it might be on the Clips channel too.
Right, I'm gonna not criticize you. I want to clarify something, Mark. What do you mean by individualism?
Right. Well, I was going to get into that. So what Peugeot says about a person is that a person is embedded with other people, right? That they're in this connected web, right? As opposed to an individual that stands apart. And so one of my deep criticisms is around the objectivist, individualist, materialist worldview, and I think those three go together somehow.
So what would you class as individualism then? Like, I'm just asking you. I don't care what anyone else. Just you, Mark.
Yeah. So individualism, the way people talk about it, seems
no. I'm asking you. What do you mean by individualism?
Well, this is what I'm trying to explain, Bill. I'm trying to explain where this comes from. Right. I'm not grabbing other people's definitions. I'm telling you what I see and how they use the word. Right. Okay. Which is to say, they are apart from everything else. And that's what causes their belief in the objective worldview, which I argue objective material reality, OMR, doesn't exist. It's not a thing. And to the extent that it does exist, the only entity that could have an objective worldview is technically God. Like, it's not going to work any other way, right? Because relativity from Einstein says, and apparently proves mathematically, although I don't know because I can't do any math, that you can't occupy the same space at the same time, and therefore, even if such a thing existed, there could only be one objective observer ever, right? And so, to me, and Einstein believed in God. To me, that's his mathematical proof for God, roughly speaking. Like,
Einstein was a pantheist, so it wasn't a monotheist. It was a pantheist. So again, he thought the universe itself was God. So it's a very Spinozian kind of view. The only reason I was criticizing on the individualism thing is that for many, there's a technical definition. There's also many view, but many people, if you ask them, like, for you, it's like, it just means there's an individual intrinsic worth to the individual, as in compared to the collective view. Like, no, it's the collective that is a worth. And this individual thing, I would say, comes clearly from the Protestant Revolution. That's the first thing. And also it's the idea that this is where the entire kind of Enlightenment worldview is like, okay, this is the idea of like canonicalizing what modern conception of rights are and such are from all of that. But the issue you're talking about there is not just, I wouldn't say necessarily individualism, I would say it's uniqueism. as in we now have to put people on a pedestal because they are unique compared to everybody else, and then put them on the pedestal.
Yeah.
And we need to praise that because they're different from everyone else.
But look,
It makes the problem is it's degeneracy.
That's John Mullen's argument. He calls it atomism, and I'm like, you guys have 1,000 names for the one word.
Yeah, but making distinctions is fun. Okay, look, you like making a good distinction from here and there. I'm like, it's fine. That's what philosophers do, right?
I'm not a philosopher.
It's a pretty important thing that I struggle with looking at forging individuals, right, with Meaning Forge. It's like, okay, so now this conversation was really relevant to me. And I'm like, oh crap, am I using the wrong word here? Because one of the major things in forging it, like in that is like that I've encountered is you have to have the ability to look into yourself, understand your uniqueness, understand yourself, understand that, and then you are revealed further through your connections with other people and your connection to the community and being able to navigate maturely through that community. Or through different networks. So,
I think you're revealed from above. Like I think the revelation. Paul will like this. He's a Calvinist, right? The revelation comes from the emanation. The revelation never comes from you. I think that's a mistake. I think that's the modern mistake, or at least one of the major modern mistakes, is that you can self-actualize or self-determine, right? That you can just sit there and have this for yourself. Like, oh, I can reveal myself to myself. It's like, yeah, try meditating.
Yeah. And so I want to make sure I draw the line here, because it's more like there's a few different things that are kind of maybe there's a transjective, transcendent type of thing that does sit here at the top that reveals, right? But if I can only go so far as an individual person, I need other people to get me the rest of the way in how I navigate through the community, and that's just the bottom of the pyramid.
So you need to be a person and not an individual. And if that's what you're saying, I agree.
That's what this would be like.
Going back quite a ways, kind of in defense of Peterson, I think actually, the way I've always heard him when he's trying to talk about individualism and the importance of it is that the purpose of individualism is to serve the community. And I don't get from anything he's suggested that tendency toward the uniqueness or that you're very special.
No,
but somebody might be, and somebody might be useful, and it's that emphasis on the individual to serve the community. And I'm not entirely clear on the necessity of the distinction between the person and the individual in this case. I'm not really following.
I'll explain it. I agree with you. That's how Peterson couches it. That's why Peterson also doesn't take emanation seriously. And I think Peterson and Vervaeke, for all the differences that they clearly have, right? They're the same in that they don't take emanation seriously, and they can't afford to because it would destroy their worldviews. In both cases, it would really rock their.
I'm going to try and steelman that position with the. I'm going to try it. I'm going to try because the reason why I'm saying this.
Let me finish my point, Bill.
Yeah,
and
please. Yeah, but I know, but I mean, I'm trying to see if I can put steelman Peterson's view with emanation. Though I meant.
Well, but he doesn't, and I think the problem is that when and Peterson doesn't make this mistake, right? He's very clever about it. But when you talk about individual, it's going to corrupt and degrade because you're not an individual. You're never going to be an individual. You need other people to live in the world because you are born from other people, and all of the things you're doing are embedded in other people from the past, having built them. So you were never an individual. You were never going to be an individual. You are always a person. And you need to recognize that, which is not to say that you have no agency. And that's where I thought Peterson went wrong, was he should have talked about agency and personhood rather than individualism. But it's a small critique. It's not really important. The important thing is he's doing great work in helping people by giving them back their agency and their ability to co-create reality with others.
Well, as a American Western individualist, I inherited it. I didn't pick it. I think you kind of have to keep the term because it's so ingrained in North American society. You cannot escape it. It has an entire complex collection of meanings.
You can fix it.
But you can always change the word individual. It's individuality to selfhood. That's all it is. Instead of personhood, you want personhood, but this is technically selfhood, and you're
No, I
actually.
want you to be a person. I want to replace.
No. But what I'm saying is
person.
that to show the distinction for some people who are listening anyway, or anything, that the individuality is selfhood, but you're talking about we should be a person. So personhood is what you should be focusing on instead, not the selfhoodness.
I think we're getting lost in terms here.
Yeah, we're getting terms. This just becomes semantic games at this point.
Here's the thing. I think words are very important, and I'm very interested in words and language and the way that they influence us and shape us. And so I'm not against the project of finding better words to put things in understanding. But as much as words have meanings, people also give words meaning. And I don't think the answer to helping people live better lives is through words. I think it's through living. And whether someone's words match their life or not, the life they live is far more impactful to themselves and the people around them to understand the difference between what it is to be an individual, a collectivist, a person, whatever you want to call it. Like, the only way you can do that is live it.
I agree with that.
I think sometimes the nitty-grittiness of the terminology and the way someone using the wrong term or whatever, I
was trying to say I wasn't trying to criticize terms. I was more of
it gets in the way of like the thing we're moving towards or trying to move towards.
Maybe not, Cassidy. I mean, I take John Vervaeke's critique of cultural cognitive grammar pretty seriously. I mean, that's what navigating patterns is about, right? Trying to fix cultural cognitive grammar to some extent, right? Trying to do better sense making by having better understanding of terms like powers and principalities, right? I have different definitions, slightly different, right? Because I think using these terms automatically corrupts. And that's the problem, is that there is a cultural cognitive grammar that actually matters. And I want to re-enchant the world by removing individualism and replacing it with personhood, which is an enchanted word. And it's enchanted precisely because it's about the connectedness to your history, the people around you, the family you were born into, for better or for worse, because, like most of my family sucks, quite honestly, so worse, right? And look, but you have to find a way to resolve that conflict, which is one of the topics that I went over with Andrea with the Bangs on the talk I did with her on it's called As Deep as a Puddle, right, about the intimacy crisis. And that's what the intimacy crisis is. And there's actually a talk on Clubhouse that I shared on the Promos channel on BOM too, that Manuel and I did on the same sort of topics, right, around connectedness and conflict.
Words in and of themselves are not going to fix the intimacy crisis.
No, I agree. But you have to point at something. You have to have something to point at, right? And, it's a bit like Pastor Paul Vanderklay's excellent observation here that, and I would argue dogma doesn't exist. Dogma is a nounized version of the real problem, which is dogmatic thinking. Dogmatic thinking is the problem, and dogma is the idolization of something, right? The incorrect idolization of something. But it's really just a noun that represents an action rather than a proper use of the language. And I think that even that derailed us. But in a sense, you need a starting point. And that starting point, for better or for worse, is the language, because that's one of the ways that we communicate to one another. But I can't live out being a person if I'm just telling myself I'm an individual all the time.
The problem is,
it doesn't start with language. It starts with intuition.
Yeah.
And we have intuitions that we struggle to put words to. And what do? We find words and shape words and play this language game to try to express the intuition. But language is not the starting point. It's something deeper.
They're not.
You got to put first things first. So I'm not against the project of, replacing words and finding better ones. But if we're not putting first things first, I think it gets a struggle on how to orient ourselves in these conversations and how helpful are they in the space, because then it becomes like word games and word salad sometimes. And
I start there though. Like, I mean, that's the problem. I mean, I think a lot of people feel disempowered. I mean, this is why I support Peterson, despite his use of the language sometimes, right? Because he empowers people to do things. These young men didn't know they could clean their room. They literally had no clue that was an option available to them, that they could change their lives. And it was through Peterson telling them this that it started. And I think that's part of the problem. Like, a lot of the Christians who are good Christians are so far away from the people they're trying to help that they're never going to get there. I mean, I think that's why Vervaeke rings with so many people, even though Pastor Paul here doesn't. It's like, well, why don't you? Oh, those guys don't like Pastor Paul at all, right? A lot of them are.
Like, I want to hear about these people.
They think nuts.
But Mark,
Well, I don't think those things are mutually exclusive, right? Like, this just sounds like the analytic synthetic distinction, right? So it just seems like the analytic point is going to be, what does it mean to clean your room, right? Does that mean that you just throw your laundry on one side of the room, right, and then take all the cups to the sink, or does that mean that you
your room? What are you talking about?
Yeah. So, or does it mean that you actually take and you move your bed from where it hasn't moved from in 4 years, vacuum under it, go wash your sheet, all these things. Now the other part of it is the experience, right? That's going to be the act of doing the thing is actually activating something that's not necessarily conscious, right? So it's understanding the analytic part first, the language, or what it entails to do the thing, and then actualizing it kind of gives you this. If you guys are familiar with Drew, Drew Johnson, I think maybe he's got a book where he says that basically he looks at the Christian prophets as more philosophers, and there's like this tradition now where they're more and more looking and they're going, no, this isn't ancient Near East as much. Like, it still is keeping with ancient Near East, but it's like it's more of like this, it's almost like an early philosophy, basically. And so he points to these things where he goes, look, it's not just knowing the thing, right? It's when Mr. Miyagi is having the Karate Kid do the motions of the waxing, on the car and stuff, right? He says, the kid is like, I'm out of here, right? You're just making me your servant to do your housework. And then when he swings something at him, his hand automatically does the thing. Right. And then he's like, oh, I have been learning stuff. I didn't realize. Right. I think there's that, that aspect.
I mean, I think too, you got to look at this in different levels, right? It's easier for us to listen to someone who is outside of our realm, who we have a respect for and admiration for, and be able to apply those things. But don't tell me those men who are getting something from Jordan Peterson never had their mom tell them to clean their room. We all have. And what do we do when our parents say, clean your room, clean your room, clean your room? We often don't do it. And there's something about being human that the closer and more intimate you get, at times, the more rebellious you can get. And the recognition that sometimes the pattern and the living out is far more effective, maybe not immediately, but long term, in the shaping and growing together of people. And that's where it's like you have to find the balance, because if it's too much on just the words and the explanations, we lose sight of the exploration of what it is to learn how to embody that and participate in that.
No, I agree. I think that concept, the concept, right, the conceptualization of the thing is very important. Like if you, like what you were just saying about the moms told them to clean the room, right? They know of the words "clean your room," but if you take, for example, somebody where it's like, what does clean your room really mean? Like from Peterson, it doesn't just it's not just clean your room, right? It's you need to take an action to actualize things changing in your life, and you can only start around you. Right, exactly, yeah. Because like if you say something like like if people want to better themselves, sometimes what they do is they want to do the aesthetic of what it seems like the thing that they should do. Like, and I'm going to start reading books, right? So then they go to the library and they find a book that looks like something intelligent. Then they go to a park and sit under a tree, and like everything seems like what it shows on TV, that you would be getting more intellectual, right, if you were to do. But we know better, right? We know that, the person in prison, that the book cart comes by and somebody throws a book on its bed, and that person starts from one paragraph. The next thing you know, this guy's more intellectual. than the person, that down the street from a university that is like trying, because what they're trying to do is they want the aesthetic. The other guy's like actualizing the concept, basically, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I reject the Protestant idea that the closer people are, the more rebellious. that certainly wasn't true for the Catholic I grew up around, but because I do think that is a Protestant sort of a relationship. But also, again, I think part of the problem is, look, these men didn't have the intuition. They at no point had the intuition that they should clean their room and pick up their general community, right? That they were pillars, or could grow into pillars of society, that they could be that hero. They never had that.
And to bring this all the way back to where we were before, that is part of the function of the church.
Right.
Because the church helps give people that vision. And by giving people that vision, you feed the intuition. And you tend to do that through symbolism. And you do that through all of this stuff that the church does. And hopefully what happens is that then that will continue to trickle down. It can take a long time through centuries in the cultures. But, Mark, with your vision, that's the stuff on top that the church continues to try to push down into the world. And that's all, your point about language. I mean, you're right that language is a garden we must continue to cultivate. But back to fairness to Cassidy, you work with the tomatoes you got, not the tomatoes you want. And so then what you do is you tend to clip, and you do a little here, you do a little there. That's what gardening is involved. And so actually what you want to do is garden the language. And that's what you're doing with complaining about your individualism. Say, let's talk about person instead of individual. And Peugeot does a ton of language gardening on his channel. In fact, that's most of what we do in these kinds of things on YouTube and on podcast is language gardening.
Which I do think is super important. I love language, and I do think that often we misuse terms or force our definitions on other people with terms. And so there's this relational aspect to that of like building bridges. But I think for me, I've gotten to the place is the answer is not better words or better information. It's living better stories and
executing. It's getting out and doing these things, going out and having an adventure, failing. And then when you fail along the way, you realize, oh, I just learned something and I made a mistake and a little part of me died, and now I can start to recalibrate. And that's kind of that grace aspect starts to seep in as part of that divination process with the church.
That's what I was saying. You were saying, Mark, earlier, saying these people got empowered. I'm like, they weren't empowered; they were encouraged. And I think there's a very big distinction here, because the narrative for the past, technically 200 years at least, is that we need to empower people, empower certain groups and whatever. And it's like, no, okay, we've got to that point that pretty much every group is now empowered, whatever. They've got the power. But what are they going to do with it? Do they literally have the courage to use that power in a good way or a bad way? No. Many of them don't even know what they're doing. This is why that Peterson, I don't think he empowered young men. He encouraged them to do stuff. And on young women as well. It's like, that's what he did. And
he explained things like you were talking about clean your room. Your mom's told you that, but Peterson told you why you should clean your room before you criticize the world. He really put a lot of things in perspective for me, where I was very confused about some of these concepts. But he acted as a bridge between, the heart and the mind, if you will.
I think there's even a step before that, and you guys are probably all going to know this better because I'm not as into Jordan Peterson as y'all. But from what I understand, it's the biblical stories and the Pinocchios and all of these myth-making things that he brought into his lectures that drew people in. So what did he do? He opened them up to the idea that they can live a story. And then when he says clean your room, they go, I trust that guy. He opened the idea that story matters. And my story matters.
And he showed courage.
Not just that. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Judge Brown. And he showed courage.
He did show courage, yeah. I was about to say, the other thing is, though, that the clean your room thing is not just also why. It wasn't like, okay, this is why you do it. It was also trying to structure it, because at the moment, the big narratives many people get told, and they do, it's all over all over the place, is that you need to save the world effectively. Not, and then to save the world requires massive actions. They're never told, like, okay, if you want to save the world, you need to start from where you are first and make it better incrementally outwards. They're told to start from the top and literally solve at the top rather than start at the bottom and work your way up.
Right.
And that's the bigger difference. So to me, I don't think it was the why. I think many people, it's obvious it's why. No, he says, no, this is a better structuring in many cases. Because literally it's like people are like, oh, I have to save the planet for, let's say, climate change, or it's recycling, or whatever the thing is. And it's like, it's so abstract, but it's so big. And people are like, oh no, we need to aim at that big thing. And it's like, no, start with the little things first.
But they know why to do those things. I mean,
they don't know why. They literally don't know why to do those things.
Some of them do.
Well,
no, they don't even know. Not some. No one.
Know why.
I mean,
they're
no
wrong.
one.
They're wrong, but they know why. They've been given a why. It's a bad.
No, they haven't been given a why. They actually haven't been given a why.
But I want to.
I mean that honestly. I'm not even exaggerating on that.
No, they absolutely have, Bill. When I talk,
well, I didn't know why, and then I listened to some of Jordan Peterson, and I was like, oh, that's why. So I know why.
I meant why, as in like, why do people need to like care about climate change? Because it's going to be bad, all this stuff, and it's like they've been told why, like,
world.
Or say, we need to save the
planet.
planet.
Their why.
And it's like, yeah, but what does that mean? Seriously,
no
one will give you an answer.
I'm not saying it's a good why, and I think, but this is where Cassidy's point is absolutely dead on, right? Peterson re-enchants the world you live in today, right now, by bringing in the Jungian archetypes, the stories, right, and showing you how you relate to those stories. And then, because he does that, right, to give all fairness to Cassidy's point, now you can tell the why, and the why makes sense. Because otherwise you can give anybody any why for anything and they have to accept it. And I think that's the difference, is that you can't tell a good why from a bad why without knowing a good narrative from a bad narrative. And he enchants the world by giving you that first and then handing you the why that you can believe.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. I think some people who can live out sort of a vision of what he's seeing. Well, I think you need more than just Peterson's vision to live out a meaningful life.
I hope so.
He's a gateway drug to a lot of other things. That's the thing about him. He leads you to all these other places that have nothing to do with him at all.
But I sometimes wonder if he likes Nietzsche so much because deep down he sort of believes that you have to make your own meaning.
What was I going to say, or what I was going to say, and then I should probably go because it's very late.
You should probably go to sleep.
But I think the people who can learn how to embody it and live it out are probably better off than the people who can explain it.
Yes.
Because there's probably a lot of people who are living it out and doing things and can't put the words to it and explain it, and they're probably better off than the people who explain it. And that's why I think you look at the lady in church who doesn't have all these apologetics arguments, and she doesn't have all of this and that, but she has faith and she has love and she lives out much more. And there's an enviness to that for a lot of people, especially those who doubt.
Some of the unsophisticated Christians. I got to run, folks, but you keep talking. And thanks for the great conversation as always.
Lovely chatting, Paul.
See you, man.
All right.